Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 183, the last episode of 2011. It's time to break out the tissues, everybody. This is recorded December 28th, 2011. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
And you know what? You need to break tissues out for the right reasons.
Because Jeremy's not
you're
here?
in front of your computers. Let's not get anything mistaken.
No more ideas. Yeah, we know. Wait until after this show is done, please. Otherwise, it's kind of weird. For both either you, Josh, or the people that are actually listening or watching. Definitely that. So it's the end of 2011. I think it's only fitting that we have no Canadians on the show to celebrate the end of the year, right? So we didn't have a show last week because of, I don't know, some Christmas or something. This week, we're ringing out the year, getting ready for CES. It's time for all that kind of stuff. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about because we missed basically a week of super awesome news. Am I right, guys?
Because Christmas is full of super awesome releases, at least for AMD.
You know, I'm thinking if we hadn't skipped last week's show, we probably would have nothing to talk about. So it's probably good.
I could talk about my pneumonia. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that sounds really intriguing.
Detail.
But people are here to talk about to listen to people talk about hardware. I think pneumonia, different podcast. Check out This Week in Pneumonia. It'll be up soon. First thing we're talking about is a couple of graphics card releases and a couple of reviews that I wrote up. First one. This one's we'll be quick and to the point with it. This is a Galaxy GeForce GTX 570 MDT X4.
You know, I hate to interrupt.
But you're going to anyway.
But my OCD has just kicked in.
Okay.
You said nothing about where you can find this podcast, how you can get a hold of you, or how you can follow you on Twitter.
You're such an ass. PCper.com/podcast is where you find the show. Hopefully you have already found it, but if you'd like to share it with all of your friends that come over for the New Year's party, that's where you send them. Twitter.com/PCper, Facebook.com/PCper. Hey, you know the new hotness is YouTube.com/PCper. We got lots of great videos up there. They're all of Josh and his pneumonia.
Hey, do we have an 888 number?
We do. It is 888-38-PC-PER. It's a toll-free number in the U.S. and Canada, at least for the rest of the year. I don't know about 2012. We'll have to see what happens. And, of course, the ever-classic email address, podcast@pcper.com, also known as the address I get the most spam possible because it's published to the website in plain text.
Hey, before you go any further, honestly, just this, why don't you tell us about the video card?
So this is the video card. This is the Galaxy GeForce GTX 570 X4 MDT. I forgot that. That's a very important moniker. Why is that important? Because this is a single GPU graphics card, right? This is a GTX 570. Pretty much everybody knows about it. It's a 480 shader cores, CUDA cores as they call them, because they're schmancy. 1.25 gigs of memory. Nothing new and exciting there. That card's been out for about a year. What's new is the output panel here. You see that there are 4 DVI ports. One of which is labeled DVI-I, and 3 of which are labeled DVI-D, 1, 2, and 3. And also there's a mini HDMI port down there as well. What this basically allows you to do is to run multiple display gaming on a single GPU NVIDIA card. And that's not really possible with NVIDIA reference designs, although it is possible on basically every AMD card since the 4000 series. Is that right, Josh? 4000?
5000 series. Had iFinity and all kinds of extra goodies.
So 5000, you can support 3 displays on basically any card. One of them had to be DisplayPort, which is kind of a bummer. This one, you can run, obviously, as you can see, 4 DVI ports. The DVI-I is the only one that will support 30-inch panel. Anything over 19 by 12, that has to go on the single DVI-I port right there. The 3 other ones, here's what's kind of interesting about this card is Galaxy is using a IDT chip that takes the other dual-link DVI connection from the GPU and actually splits it into these 3 different connections. So basically, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, you guys that may know more specifics about it, but essentially, the DVI connection is just bandwidth. It's just bandwidth, data rates, bit widths, all that kind of stuff. So rather than kind of conform it into a single display, they basically split it out. So now a third of that bandwidth can go to each of those display connections, the DVI ports on the card. This allows you to run at resolutions up to 5760 by 1080, which is triple 1080p monitor gaming. That's what it's intended for, is to run three 1080p screens for surround gaming. But this is not an NVIDIA surround product. It's not an Eyefinity product. This is Galaxy's own deal, MDT, multi-display technology. They had released other MDT cards before. The problem was they didn't support 1080p resolutions on three displays. They supported like 1680 by 1050 and that kind of stuff, which are much less common, much less popular for gamers today, especially gamers that are going to look at multi-monitor gaming. So the card's goal is to give NVIDIA gamers the ability to run triple display gaming configurations for less money than you can do otherwise. So this card will run you $360. I'm trying to remember exactly, $360 or $370. And it has all the performance characteristics of a slightly overclocked GTX 570 as you would expect. Good performance, really high up there. Not GTX 580, but well above that of a 560 Ti. So the drawback to this card, though, is because of the bandwidth limitations, those at 5760 by 1080 are limited to 50 hertz instead of 60 hertz, which causes a couple of issues. 379. Thank you, Bert, for pointing that out. It's 379 for the card. At 50 hertz, you run into the issue of some displays not being able to run at 50 hertz, which means if you have three of those monitors and hook them up to this, they'll be like, not going to do it. They're not going to run at the custom resolution you have to set in this to get that to work. And even when you do, then you have to worry about, will the game support it? And I don't really completely understand why this is the case, but apparently some game titles do not support running at 50 hertz refresh rates. Even if you have VSync turned off and all that kind of stuff, it won't really matter. So if you look at games like all the Valve source-based games won't run at 50 hertz resolutions. Batman Arkham City won't run at 50 hertz resolution. Now, we tested Deus Ex, Civ 5, Battlefield 3, Dirt 3. Those all did run at 5760 by 1080 at 50 hertz. So you're kind of in this area where some games are just going to work out of the box. Battlefield 3 just worked. Deus Ex just worked. Dirt 3 required you to modify an INI file, but very upfront, very easy to do. The Valve source games did not work. One of the Galaxy reps told me that they can work with a lot of hacking. That kind of extends outside the scope of what most users are willing to do. So it's a mixed bag on the card. It's a very good attempt, right? Because NVIDIA has never addressed this issue directly. If you want to do surround gaming, you have to have an SLI configuration, whether or not that's SLI with two cards or SLI in a single card, like the GTX 590 or whatever. That's the only way you can do surround on a single card. Galaxy, with their partnership with IDT, try to figure out a way around this. They've improved it now, one iteration, letting you get up to 1080p, triple 1080p monitors, but there's still the issue of that kind of 50 hertz limitation. Depending on the games you play, you may never run into that limitation. However, if you want to play Counter-Strike Source, first of all, it's time to get updated, bro. Second, it's you're just kind of SOL, right? There's nothing you're gonna be able to do with that. And then you could buy a second 570 and do it that way, but then don't waste the money on MDT, because your $30 or $40 premium for that technology is going to be wasted when you're only using, one or two of the display outputs anyway. So it's a very interesting product. It's tough because I've always encouraged these board partners, they have to differentiate, right? How does Galaxy stand out from EVGA, stand out from MSI, stand out from ASUS in terms of these NVIDIA and AMD graphics cards? And the MDT series is one that definitely does it. So if you're interested, you can run 4 displays on this card. You can run the 3 1080p or less resolution if you want. Triple monitor for gaming. You still have a 4th monitor that you can use for alternate usage, right? So you have a 4th monitor that's like an alt monitor, which is really, really nice. And they have a GTX 560 Ti X5, MDT X5, that actually supports 5 displays at the same time. So you can do, they have some really interesting technology. So if you're curious about it, look up the Galaxy MDT series. You guys have any thoughts or questions on this product and its kind of placement or viability?
So why would you want this rather than, playing devil's advocate?
Mm-hmm.
say a 6950 or a 6970, or one of the Asus versions of the 6950, which supports 4 native display ports out of it altogether.
Well, this will have better performance than I think even the 6970, or right at about the same performance level of the 6970. And it's going to be about the same price as the 6970. A lot of people want to pick sides, right? NVIDIA versus AMD. With NVIDIA, you do get support for PhysX and any of the apps that still only run on CUDA-based stuff. 3D Vision will work as well on this. So you get some of those features, but I agree with you. I think that there's your devil's advocate stance has a lot of merit to it. It's like, well, why pick this one that has this kind of 50 hertz limitation if there are other options out there that don't have it? If this was like the first ever of its kind, it's like, wow, you got to try this out. Even with the 50 hertz limitation, that may affect some people. Otherwise, but
well,
today's
actually,
market,
I do have one thing, in the positive there.
Yep.
I think the AMD cards only support 3 monitors, 60 hertz at one time, unless you have one of those MDT hubs that are not yet available yet, where you can do 6, or you can pay an extra $200 for a 6 card output.
Right. Yeah. Well, they mean the AMD cards will support 360 hertz displays, but one of them has to be DisplayPort.
Correct.
Either have a DisplayPort monitor or an active DisplayPort to VGA or DVI or whatever it is you're going to use there. But the MDT hubs aren't going to be available until summer 2012, so I almost am tired of people bringing that up until I actually see one in use and for sale. So yeah, check out that review. It's there's a lot of benchmarks and that kind of stuff as well. But I think the more we want to move past that, because we want to talk about the AMD 7970 that was released this past week as well. This is the brand new architecture, 28 nanometer Southern Islands GPU from AMD, completely new design. This is not a Cayman. This is a Tahiti. That is the name of Tahiti is the name of the chip. Southern Islands is the name of the architecture. This is the highest end single GPU offering they're going to make. It has 2,048 shader processors, stream processors. It has 3 gigabytes of frame buffer.
Gigabytes. No, why would we even want to talk about this in the first place? Because, you got a console. You don't need heavy duty graphics.
You don't.
Isn't
I don't know why.
let's
Let's just move on to the SSD stuff then.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Alan, talk about it. Stat.
Josh, you could probably talk a little bit more about what the architecture does differently. It's moved away from VLIW design to a vector scalar architecture, which doesn't mean a whole lot maybe to a lot of people. But we kind of way to simplify it is that they have moved away from a more GPU-centric design to a more compute-centric design, which helps out in a lot of areas.
That is correct. This is a really fascinating design because a lot of people are saying, well, AMD is just going to go the way of NVIDIA. They're going to kind of copy their architectures best they can, and we're going to have, something that's not very exciting. But in fact, AMD has brought out something out very, very interesting. It's NVIDIA has almost a pure scalar type architecture with their, G80 and above. I mean, they've got a lot of small, stream processors doing scalar type results. It's easier to compile for. You can do a lot of interesting things. It's very efficient. There are some things that it doesn't do very well, namely, it can't do some operations as fast as a pure vector processor. So what AMD has done is created a general compute unit that has 4 by 16 wide vector processors plus a scalar unit. So the scalar unit spits out all of these kind of specialized results that are more aimed towards those kind of operations, and they've got these huge 4 by 16 wide vector units. That's the majority of the pixel operations, and plus it is also the majority of a lot of the general computing unit type stuff. If you look at like what Intel has done with Larrabee, it has 4x16 wide vector units as well, plus the x86 processor and the floating point unit attached to it. So this is a huge jump for AMD. It's it's as big as what NVIDIA saw when going from the GeForce 7900 series and 7800 series to the G80 processors, which powered the 8800, 8600, all those products, and now through what we see with the GTX 580. So
that doesn't necessarily translate into performance in gaming, right? But you're talking about more in terms of how dramatic a change it is architecturally.
Yeah, architecturally, it's huge. Now, in terms of gaming performance, it's also a pretty big jump because they're adding a whole lot of stream processors. They're adding a way to make the pipeline more efficient, so that more of these stream processors are actually used in both general computing and in graphics. And so this is kind of a big win-win for AMD. And they're going to have some hiccups. It's not a huge difference in terms of overall throughput, but what they're going to be able to do in terms of compute, it's a lot more flexible. When you look back and say, hey, tessellation is going to be improved. It still has the basic, not so much throughput, but overall geometry of the previous version. But what they've done is if they've done a lot of enhancements to it. It's what do they call it? A 5th generation tessellator, a 7th generation?
It's like 9th or some weird. I don't know.
Because
it's like
the first tessellation they had was in the Radeon 8500 series, which was back 10 years ago almost. Yeah,
nobody used it, but it was nice.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called, and something. But anyway,
so I mean,
they've done a lot of pipeline. They've done a lot of work on it, as compared to like Bulldozer on the CPU side. The graphics guys are really producing nice products. VLIW4,
they actually changed their architecture and it worked.
Yeah, this is a positive thing for AMD, and it's something that they can potentially build on. But I mean, VLIW4 stuff was still good. I mean, it competed well against the GeForce technology, which was, more advanced in how it was able to process not just pixels, but general compute. And this is a huge step for AMD, and it's something that they needed for, the past 2 generations. But they haven't been quite able to get. But at the same time, they've been pushing the technology further. They were the first guys that had DirectX 11. They're now the first guys that have DirectX 11.1. And so they have their focus on kind of the sweet spot of the industry and the market. And even though they have not quite overtaken NVIDIA, they are a very ample competitor to them. And with this broadside, it's going to be interesting to see what NVIDIA does, because they've got DirectX 11.1, which, certainly we're not going to see any games in the next 8 months that's going to support this, except some, maybe outlier type things and some benchmarks. But they've caught up in compute. These processors are very compute focused, as well as being able to push out a lot of pixels. Texturing power is really, really good. They've essentially doubled that of the previous generation. ROPs are about the same. They're 32 ROP partitions, which, when we look at even Eyefinity type resolutions, current generation ROPs are able to do that. It's just the pixel pushing power behind that needs to be kind of beefed up, and they've certainly done that. I don't think they've done anything with multi-sampling or anti-aliasing, other than kind of improve the FXAA. Yeah, just some of the algorithms there. They've improved the anisotropic filtering, which is a good thing because we like smooth scenes, and I think they've gotten away with being able to smooth out some of the shader-based AF rather. But again, that's depends on the application. What do you have to say, Ryan?
I think the architecture is really impressive. Go to the review and read all about that. Josh wrote a good introduction there on the architecture changes, and I kind of go through some of the feature changes and that kind of stuff. On the performance side of things, we completely redid our GPU testbed for this review. It's now a Sandy Bridge E-based system with 16 gigs of memory and all that kind of stuff. Completely updated it with new games as well. Battlefield 3, Skyrim, Dirt 3, Arkham City, Metro, Deus Ex, those types of things. So much more relevant, I think, here today. We also included sound level testing as well. So in general, go to the review and look at the specifics. But in general, we see 15 to 25, maybe as much as 30% performance difference between the AMD 7970 seen here and the GTX 580. So we're looking at just top-end single GPU cards. The GTX 580 now is not the fastest single GPU card, which we didn't really necessarily have to see, but we definitely expected to see since it had been a year since the release of the GTX 580. So card looks like any other. Although I'd tell you what, you see the gloss on that? I guess not a lot of people are just holding their graphics cards all the time. Yeah, I know. It's just kind of annoying to me when we're doing photos and stuff. But 8-pin and 6-pin power connection. What's that?
You got an interesting sample.
Yeah,
look at that
and some
on top.
Some references will have that. No, that label on top is mine actually. It's so when I put it in the bin, I can find it again. The output connections are kind of what we're used to here with the Cayman cards: a single dual link DVI, an HDMI, and 2 DisplayPort. The disappointing part here is if you have two 30-inch monitors or something like that, you have to do an active DisplayPort adapter there. But if you're using, I think they include an HDMI to DVI and a DisplayPort to DVI adapter or something like that. So you'll be able to do 2 monitors out of the box, at least. It does support 3-way up to 4-way graphics on it as well with the Crossfire connectors. So it's card design, layout, cooler, all that kind of stuff works just great. It's very power efficient. It runs at about the same power consumption as the 6970 while maintaining 40 to 50% better performance than the 6970. So that's actually pretty impressive. It leaves some room for NVIDIA though, because this doesn't completely blow the GTX 580 out of the water. The 580 came out a year and a month ago. The 7970 is now out, and it's about, let's say, 20 to 25% faster in most of the modern games where it matters. So it's interesting. The 3 gigs of frame buffer definitely helps with higher resolutions. It will help with the multi-display resolutions as well. For like 5760 by 1080, 3 gigs of frame buffer will definitely help you there. We're going to talk about the efficiency. It's good. One of the interesting cards that we compared it to was the EVGA GTX 560 Ti 2Win. Remember, this is the 2 560 Ti GPUs on a single PCB card. It's about the exact same price as the 7970, which we'll talk about in a second. The problem with that is you only get 1 gigabyte of frame buffer per GPU on that card, which then we ran into several problems running at super high res on Battlefield 3 or Metro 2033. You have basically 3 times the memory per GPU on the 7970 as you do on the 560 Ti 2Win. They have other new cool features like zero core power, which basically means if you have multiple GPUs, the other GPUs will physically turn off. Fans will stop spinning. Your sub-watt power consumption by the GPU when you're like in Windows mode, that type of thing. If your system goes into long idle, which is basically the screen going blank, going to sleep on it, even a single GPU card will go into that sub-watt power consumption mode, which is really nice. The bad part, $549 retail price, $549.
That's kind of a record for AMD.
It's pretty high up there. The problem is, so here's my issue. It's actually a justified price because the GTX 580 sells for $499. So you're only talking about a 10% price premium over that card for 20 to 30% performance premium. Not bad, right? You think, okay, that's not so bad. My problem with it is that the high-end GPU market has suddenly decided it's not going to budge. The GTX 580, as I've said several times, came out a year and a month ago. at $499. Today it sells for $499. That sucks. We've seen so much kind of change and compression in the mid-range to low-end graphics card market. We talked about this for the last year forever, Josh, right? About how much gaming power you can get for $150 or $200 and how it kept getting better and better and better. Well, once you get above like 250, there's these big jumps where you also need to go to 350 to 450 to 550 now, and I don't like it. I guess is what I'm saying, because NVIDIA had no real competition at the super high end single GPU battle. NVIDIA never had to bring their $499 price down. Now I'm hoping that they will. I'm hoping with the 580 will come down maybe $50, maybe $75. That'll force kind of AMD to pull down some, because there's a possibility that it just all stays where it is and prices just keep going up. But that's, I don't know. Look at the price.
Well, how much power do you really need?
$200 less.
How much power do you really need? This is a market that now is a mature market. Gaming GPUs are not seeing the leaps and bounds that we have seen in the past. I mean, if you look at, say from 1999 to 2003, the jumps that you have seen were tremendous. Now compare that to the jumps that we have seen from the Radeon 4800 through the 5800 through the 6900 and now the 7900. The jumps are just not as large, and so these manufacturers take advantage of that and saying, you know what, there's no reason for us to drop down our prices. We're going to make some profit here, because the manufacturing process is going to go down. It's going to go down. We're going to make more money per card. If we both keep it up here, then people are going to have to pay what they have to pay to get this high-end performance. If not, hey, spend $150 on a HD 6850, and get really good gaming performance on a single monitor. Do the same thing for a GTX 560 or a 560 Ti. Those are still in those areas where most people can afford them. They can throw out the bucks. They can get, better performance in their Star Wars: The Old Republic than they did before with their previous generation stuff. So, as an enthusiast, I would love to see prices go down. I would love to be able to buy these cards at sub $400 prices within 6 months of them being delivered. But at the same time, I'm a car driver. I would love to see that 2012 Explorer be down at $25,000 instead of the $36,000 that it's at. But that's just not going to happen. We're entering the stage where we really do have a mature market for graphics, processors, and whatnot. We're not going to see a whole lot of leeway like we did in the past with these products, because the manufacturing is just not keeping up with the advances that we saw in the graphics.
I don't like the words you said, Josh.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's fine. It's kind of what I expect, but I'm hoping that something will change. So we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Those BitBoys guys, they're still around. They could, throw something out.
They could really shake this market up.
So good, it'll scare everybody else, and they'll drop their prices.
So let's stop talking about graphics cards for a little bit. Talk with Alan about hard drives and SSDs. Alan, I know I wrote this editorial type thing based off data, but I know you read it. And I'd like for you to discuss kind of what it tells us, basically. This post, SSD and HDD price analysis, end of shortage in sight. What is what am I talking about?
So Ryan got his hands on some really good data, actually, from the hard drive industry. And basically it just details exactly what we've been talking about for past couple months now, where flooding in Thailand resulted in huge dips in inventory of hard drive components, and then that just trickled down into the, all the way down into the market. So what was this? It was like mid to end October. That's where the dip, and all the suppliers ended up just losing all of their whatever extra stock they had lying around. PC industry tends to not keep components, like huge stockpiles of components lying around. Hard drives are just, luckily, were one of the bigger ones where they actually had some decent amount of inventory. So the numbers we ended up digging up were, I think wasn't this like just across the whole industry, Ryan, like as far as inventory numbers?
Yeah, so it's like they monitor kind of the major distributors of PC technology, like component technology. So not necessarily Newegg, but the people who actually sell to Newegg and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Sell to
right.
Newegg and Provantage and CDW and those guys.
So basically, you had what you have to appreciate is that there's just a huge amount of volume moving in this, where you had people thinking, it's no big deal. We've only, when it first happened, you had manufacturers saying, oh, it's not too bad. It's only 20 or 30% of our volume. We're actually making these things elsewhere. But there's so much volume moving, and that didn't necessarily stop with these announcements, right? So we saw inventory drop. It was like 150,000 units, and then it just dropped within like just days down to almost nothing. And it stayed there. And then there was a bunch of other trickle-down effects from that, right? We had a couple other posts since then on, actually, I'm not even sure we covered this on the podcast last week, but did we cover that Intel piece where they're shipping less CPUs on account of this?
Yeah, I think so. A couple weeks ago we did. So they're basically predicting a shortage in system sales as a whole because of this.
Right, and a lot of other stuff ended up coming from that too. Something I'm working on a piece right now that's probably going to go up later tonight. That warranties ended up getting cut back. And just a couple of quick theories on that is that you had all of a sudden these things were really scarce and the prices were going up a whole bunch, right? So you had what was happening before, which is where hard drives were pretty darn cheap, and a person would take a failure as just an excuse to go buy some newer, bigger one, right? And probably not even go through the hassle of a warranty return.
Right.
And then now all of a sudden it's this, it's a scarcity, right? So they're cashing in on warranties, and obviously you had manufacturers feeling the pain of not being able to keep up with supply, and on top of that, they probably got a little bit of a rush of warranty people coming in saying, "Hey, I've got a 5-year warranty on my drive, and it just broke. Give me my money, or give me another drive," right? But fortunately, what these numbers show is that at the end of our data there, which was mid-December, just like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, the inventory started coming back up, which is good, especially since realize that volume is still going to be there. You're still going to have people trying to buy these things, especially through Christmas shopping and whatnot. And even despite all of that, those numbers were still starting to creep back up. So that's
prices
good.
have kind of started to come down a little bit in that top graph as well. It shows the top 50 hard drive SKUs. So the theory is inventory coming back, prices coming down, hopefully quicker than say that Seagate CEO wants us to believe.
Yeah, that Seagate story was like they were talking Q3 or something. I mean, it was.
They said at least
out there.
2012, almost all of 2012. So.
Right, and hopefully that's not the case here. Actually, we'll sort of see how it pans out just based on which prices drop first. You'll be able to figure out who recovered their supply faster than the other guy.
Right.
But
so what about
just,
the SSD price index of this story, where they talk about this is mostly good news about like a 23% drop in SSD prices over the last year, essentially.
Well, yeah, but realize that graph didn't change horribly, other than a blip due to just like I don't know what that was. It just sort of prices jumped up just a tiny bit. I guess they were anticipating a high demand and
it
people
jumped quite a
buying
bit.
SSDs.
I think they say it was a. Did they say what it is?
It's like a 10-15%, something like that jump.
Yeah.
I don't know, just from the looks of it. It jumped up, but it didn't stick. Right after like a week, it went down almost exactly where it was before. But if you look at that over the course of that whole year, yeah, it's just a steady decline in the prices, which is good. Cost per gig coming down. But we've been watching this happen for years now. So this is just the thing that we just sort of expect to happen with solid state in general, right? As the processes get smaller nanometer, more memory per die, all that stuff just eventually trickles out into the products. Most recent, what was it, the OCZ with the Octane? There's the H2 or S2 model that came out. It's the one using even cheaper flash. And was just pricing a couple of those a few minutes ago, and it was like $1.20 per gig.
Wow, that's good.
And that's just market. They're available for that. Like you could buy one right now. And the Octane series, the one that came out just before, is when we first wrote the piece on that, none of them were on the market, so we couldn't really gauge it. But now they're looking like almost any capacity is around $1.50 a gig. So not as low as we were hoping, but hopefully they'll come down. I mean, they just started coming out on the market. Yeah, and we just got through the Christmas shopping season, so prices should drop in the new year on those two. But industry wide, we should still see those things that continue to come down, especially with 20 nanometer, not just 2x nanometer or 25 nanometer. Now there's 20 nanometer flash being produced. It's not in end user products yet, but it's going to get there. If we look at how the 25 nanometer rollout happened, probably within 6 months we'll see a drive shipping with 20 nanometer installed in it.
Cool.
And again, this stuff's just going to keep getting cheaper and cheaper. Compare that with the hard drive stuff, though. I don't know. I think I don't think that SSD price index we see drops really so much due to they're shipping so much more compared to hard drives over time. But I think that's probably going to start. Right, we're going to start seeing a pretty decent landslide. I was hoping it would sort of happen with this event, like with the flooding, but from these numbers, that didn't seem to make the push, right?
Right.
But it's coming.
It will be there. So I'm curious, did any of you get the only item on my Christmas wish list for me, and maybe you forgot to send it?
Probably. Because I'm kind of a bugger that way.
I only had one thing on my list this year. It's just a 36-inch display. Nothing.
That's it.
Nothing too fancy. Just wanted a 36-inch monitor.
I think your wife got it for you.
Did she? Well, she forgot to give it to me as well. It's from a company called ISO. It's a DuraVision FDH 3601. Nothing special. I mean, it's a little expensive. It's about $30,000. Has a 4096 by 2160 resolution. It's 4K display.
That's
used
it?
It's a medical grade type device used for, obviously in these photos, used for playing Dirt 3 at super high resolution, which I think is very important. So this at the Tech Day for the 7970, AMD had one of these on display, and it was very impressive. It requires 2 DisplayPort inputs or two dual link DVI inputs to run that resolution. 4096 by 2160 again, and it looks good. And it's $30,000. And this is kind of why I get kind of bitter when we talk about 1080p monitors and all that kind of stuff, because they've been the standard for so long, and there's nothing that's really creeping up on them in any significant way. The 2560 by 16 panels have really not come down in price dramatically over the last couple of years. And then what does Apple have? The 2560 by 1440. Is that what that resolution is? 27-inch panel. Good screen. But again, just kind of not coming down in price. So really maybe we should just skip the 2560 resolution and go straight to 4K. What do you guys think?
Sure. Do it.
Yeah.
Can we afford to?
No.
Damn it.
I mean, if I don't pay you guys for all of 2012, we might be able to get one. Two.
I think it's coming. But I think Apple might actually be pushing that more than PC makers in general, right? Because we've seen a couple of stories past few weeks of possibilities of MacBooks having Retina level displays, like 200, 300 DPI displays.
Yeah, I don't care really who does it, as long as see, my problem with Apple doing it is that it will never come down in price still.
Right. But then there'll be a SKU and a part for other people to buy, hopefully, other manufacturers to buy, hopefully, and then at some point in the future, you just need the volume to happen.
The problem with Apple in this market is that they have the strength and the bullying ability to tell any vendor, you will make this part and you will only make it for us. and they can do that very well for extended periods of time.
Yep.
Here's the problem with all that. Back in 2004, I bought my first 23-inch widescreen display SIPS monitor for $1,100.
God, you're
Some
full.
4 years later, they had a 30-inch for $1,300, and now we still got a 30-inch for $1,100 to $1,300. It's just
Yeah, exactly.
we're at the point where they just don't go down anymore. Which
I don't.
On those
I don't-
sizes.
Yeah.
On those sizes, right? In the meantime, 24s have gone down to almost nothing.
It's like the
Right.
same thing as the graphics card story, right? All the mid-range to low-end cards continue to come down in price and continue to be battled, whereas the $499 GeForce card is still $499. It's like
Yep.
it's like they hate us, I guess is what I'm saying. They hate you specifically, all of you watching.
yeah,
Just
you.
us that have a 30-inch.
I especially hate Alan because, well, he's Alan.
It happens.
Look at-
So
look at those
you go to the story, look at the pretty pictures. It's obviously hard to show the beauty of a 4K display in a 1600 pixel image or whatever. But if you want to go see one, it's pretty neat to see. And again, if you want to get me a late Christmas present, I will allow it. I won't even be mad if it's because it's after Christmas. A couple
Even
of
though
other
you need a
things.
video card with the dual.
I got those.
Dual
I got the video
DVI.
cards to do it. I can do that. Trust
You've
me.
got like
You get me a
7
monitor, I'll get the cards. Not a problem. Exactly.
Okay, fine.
So we talked about the 7970. There was a leak that came out from I don't know which one of these sites, VR Zone. There's apparently a slide about the GTX 780. Maybe they're going to skip the 600 series altogether and go straight to 700 because 700 versus 7000 is way better than 7000 versus 600.
Well, not only that,
First
but,
rule,
you know,
market.
if you see the GTX 280, 285, and they
did
jumped
go
to
to-
the GTX 400 series. What happened to the
Yeah,
GTX?
but they didn't go
380?
4 to 6. They went 4 to 5.
What are you talking about?
What I'm saying is they went from 280 to 480, but then they went 480 to 580.
Yeah, but now it's time to skip, just like they went from 9800 to the 280s, right? It makes sense.
Because the 10,000,
Correct
the
me if I'm
10280 was. You're wrong.
Okay. You know what? It's
Regardless of
marketing.
whatever the naming scheme is, the graph that they show is, of course, NVIDIA confidential, where benchmarks run at 2560 by 1600 on a Sandy Bridge E platform, it looks like, and they compare 580 to 570 at this resolution. And if you look at some games like Crysis 2, seeing more than 2x performance. Battlefield 3, more than 2x performance. Metro, more than 2x performance. Dirt 3, almost 2x performance. Batman Arkham City, like 1.8x performance. If that is the case, if these are true, it will beat the 7970 once again. We will be in the same position we were at with the GTX 580 versus the 6970, where NVIDIA has the true highest end single GPU card, and AMD is kind of off to the side, and they have to depend on their dual GPU offering to maintain their highest end credibility. I'm okay with that because the potential is the 780 becomes the new $500 video card, and the 7970 becomes the new $350 to $400 video card because it's getting beat again by the 780. What do you think? Legit?
I have no idea because those are some pretty big numbers.
More
For
than 2x.
What
It's
is
huge.
essentially a small jump in architecture and another smaller jump in terms of process geometry.
I mean, their clock speeds would have to go up pretty dramatically. The GTX 580 runs at 732 megahertz today, so the 780 maybe runs at 1100 megahertz or something.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I mean, these could be just internal NVIDIA things. If it's real, then great, because we're going to go through this third, golden age of 3D graphics where we have incredible performance at the high end, really good stuff at the middle end, and the middle, and fantastic stuff at the low end. But I don't know. I mean, that's wishing for ponies and unicorns and rainbows, because I just don't see the process technology and the architectural advancements coming that would enable this kind of performance over their previous top end. I mean, if you look at what AMD did, they had a massive architectural shift. It's much more efficient. It's got greater throughput. It's got more numbers behind it. And they're still doing, what, 30 to 40% improvement, not double that?
Mm-hmm.
I
So
don't
you're
know.
saying
Grain of
they might
salt.
be full of crap? Is that what you're saying?
Sure, why not? Full of crap.
Possible they're full of crap. Okay, well, it's just a rumor anyway. Interesting to talk about. Something that's not a rumor is I just posted up a little story here on Battlefield 3 and some issues that I and apparently some other users have been having. I noticed when I was redoing all of our testing, the Battlefield 3 at 2560 by 1600 on the GTX 580 exhibited a very odd behavior. I made a little video of it as well. So what's interesting is that you'll be playing blah, 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 30 frames per second, 30 to 32 frames per second. Everything's great. And your performance is is about there. Your power consumption is like 430, 440 watts. And suddenly your frame rate will drop to about 10. As in the video we're showing now, you can see that we're running 335 watts, 11 frames per second. And all of a sudden I'll just sit still. And all of a sudden you'll see the frame rate hike up and the power consumption hike up as well. So all of a sudden we're getting 3 to 4 times the performance and 100 watts more power consumption. And if you watch this video, this is just happened to be one of the things, we just happened to record it at this instance. It happens several times throughout the video. You'll see as I get ready to go through this door, I believe, as soon as you step out here. No, never mind. It'll happen a little bit later. But it happens three times in a short 2-minute video, which is obviously pretty damn annoying. And it was consistent. Different 580 graphics cards. I saw people online talk about 560s doing the same thing. The people who had lower end cards were running at not 2560 by 1600 resolution. So apparently this does happen at like 1080p with other graphics cards. And then what was the other main issue here? Oh yeah, we even tried different test beds. I thought it was going to be related to the X79 platform that we started using for GPU test bed. Turns out it was not. We actually rebuilt the X58 test bed, installed the game, and same driver, same video card, same problem. So yeah, you can see down to 330 watts. I mean, what would have been your first guess, Josh, had you noticed this and been able to see what was happening? You know, you get a power consumption drop, which is something most consumers, most gamers wouldn't be able to see. They would just see their frame rate drop. But because I was able to see the power consumption drop, what have been what's your thought?
My gut feeling, it's a driver issue because the hardware is not being utilized, and therefore you don't see the power consumption. You have a decrease in power consumption, decrease in performance. There's something going on with the driver and the software level that either needs to be resolved by the guys who make the game or the guys who make the driver. Oddly enough, you did not see this with the AMD cards, correct?
I did not. Yeah, we tested a 7970 in the same platform at 2560, and we did not see the slowdown.
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with the hardware. It's going to be an issue with the software driver. So my guess is it's going to be a driver issue. They're going to see something in there within the next 2 weeks, and they're going to provide a fix. So it's really good of you to report upon, but hopefully it'll be fixed.
All right, so we've got that. If anybody else has seen that problem or thinks they have an idea of what is causing it, or they have a specific setting maybe that addresses it, let us know. Send us the email, podcast@pcper.com, and let us know. What else happened real quick this week, in the last 2 weeks? AMD refreshing the A series of APU, Josh. What is this? Is this the magical change we've all been hoping to make Llano and AMD processors important again for CPU performance?
That's a really good question. They've released a bunch of new Llano-based processors. They have the K series, which are unlocked. You can go 500 megahertz up on core speed and 200 megahertz in graphics speed. So that makes it a much more interesting part for people who are willing to push that. But for people who just want to buy like an Intel processor or a Phenom 2 X6, which are in really low quantities now, it's not such a big deal. But what the big deal is that they do have a bunch of different parts out. It kind of looks like that AMD and Global Foundries are over the big hump with the Llano processors. They're producing them in much larger quantities with better yields, and so they're both making a little bit more money off of this, which is good for everybody. The products themselves are pretty good. You know, if you look at a overall CPU, GPU functionality in one chip that's under $130, you know, Llano is a very good deal. I mean, you can still play a lot of good games, good video performance. You can still get good encoding performance, even though it doesn't have the quick sync that Intel has. When you measure all these things out, Llano is a very compelling choice. And it finally seems like AMD and Global Foundries have got it together and are producing these in the volume they're hoping for. And the bad part about this would be it may be pushing Trinity back a little bit more so they can sell more of these parts. And Trinity, from all indications, is a much superior processor, but it's only going to be available for mobile for probably the next 6 to 8 months. So make your decisions in terms of hardware. If you've got a grandma, mom, dad, sister who doesn't play many games, then it's a good part to have. I mean, it's going to have plenty of performance. It's going to be an all-around good performer, especially in graphics and video. But yeah, it's kind of bittersweet in terms of, you know, they've improved yields. They're able to offer all these more SKUs. They're able to provide the channel with all these parts, but at the same time, they're not forced to go to the next generation to give you a better deal. So weigh it out there.
Actually, I have one of these processors right here.
You got a K?
It is a 3870. Is that one of the unlocked ones? Is that one of the K ones?
That's the 3870K is the unlocked 3.0 gigahertz product. Should do very well. I'm going to be curious to see your overclocking because it'll be unlocked to 3.5 gigahertz, but when you start throwing in some of the you know, the base clock up to 320, 325. We'll really see where these new products can go. So it's going to be actually kind of interesting to see for those who are rather, you know, budget enthusiasts who, you know, want to get the best bang for the buck. And this certainly might be a product that will deliver that.
Alrighty. Let's see. What else happened? Alan, anything else going on in the world of storage that I maybe missed here in our show notes before we get into a couple of more quickie things?
Nothing recently. Nothing
brewing. I think CES will see quite a bit of new storage related goods.
I hope so, because it's been quiet.
It's been quiet. We don't want quiet. What else happened? Richard Huddy. This might be a little inside baseball for a lot of people. Richard Huddy, what was he at ATI at AMD? Josh, he was
director of
graphics
developer
processing?
Relations. Remember some years back when NVIDIA said, hey, we've got an open thing that we can share with you. So, hey, Richard Huddy, give us an email. Drop us a line. We'll get back to you. We'll work together. It'll be synergism. Synergism.
All right.
Never happened. They never accepted his emails or calls. Poor Richard Huddy. And now where is he off to?
Intel?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, right? So there's all kinds of theories going around now. Is, you know, he kind of co-invented DirectX. Is he really going to bring that graphics mindset to Intel? I find it hard to believe that Intel wouldn't already have the right kind of minds inside the company. I don't know if he's just going to be that VP bigwig to kind of give it all credibility, maybe. It's kind of interesting, but Intel has no problems gobbling up good marketing, product, and people from all a lot of people have been contacted by Intel after those big AMD layoffs a couple of months ago. So good news for those people that needed jobs. Bad news if you're a fan of AMD, losing a lot of kind of their marketing muscle, maybe even a lot of their kind of development muscle.
You know,
as well.
he's more technical muscle. I mean, this guy
Okay.
had it going on, and you know, he probably
Co-invented
was
DirectX.
making
That's
some
pretty
good money.
Pretty good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Intel has some money. They can afford people. Last little news story here. Then Intel releases new Cedar Trail Atom processors to about as little fanfare as any processor release I can remember from Intel. Posted a press release on their site. Posted a PDF on their website talking about it. These are 32 nanometer based Atom processors. They succeed the older Pine Trail M Atom processors. Let's see, they'll be available in January, so I imagine we'll see a lot of, well, hopefully we'll see some Cedar Trail based products at CES. What's kind of interesting here is they very specifically talk about netbook plans, which I thought was a term that had been destroyed and that nobody wanted to mention anymore. They didn't want to talk about netbooks. They have a little graphic here showing the netbook forecast for 2012. Red arrows, I'm guessing, are bad, meaning declining sales or declining desire from the people there. Up in Latin America, up in Africa, up in APAC, up in Eastern Europe, down in Western Europe, down in, I guess that's Japan, Korea, that kind of stuff, and even in the People's Republic of China, their push. But what's kind of, I think a lot of people thought that this part was going to be kind of aimed at tablets and that kind of stuff. It doesn't appear to be the case. They never really mentioned tablets. They never really mentioned anything they mentioned new form factors. Well, tablet's not a new form factor anymore, so they might be trying to recreate the idea of the mid again. But based on kind of the understated release of this processor, they don't seem particularly excited about where it's going. They don't really think it's going to change things very dramatically over what Pine Trail did. It's a little bit late, I think, too, right? So not a whole lot.
It's a 32 nanometer part that the core CPU product is unchanged. It's just going to a smaller geometry, more efficient, can run a little faster, but that's it. What's the big thing is they've gone over from the Intel GMA 3100 graphics to a Power VR part, which is still DirectX 9. So you don't get the DX10, DX11 functionality of it that, say, like the AMD Bobcat does. But apparently it's a little bit more efficient, can do more things than the Intel part. It's got the H.264 decoding that does very, very fast. It's a positive thing. So, you know, they're running a little faster. Architectural changes are minimal at best. You're namely running off of a smaller process geometry that will, you know, lower the power, and they have a more optimized graphics technology from PowerVR. They've been in the mobile business for the past 10 years and have done very well for themselves there. I mean, it's kept the dang company afloat. So it's going to be interesting to see how this does against the 40 nanometer Bobcat from AMD. And now that they've kind of optimized that design for this next quarter, 2 quarters at 40 nanometer, we're going to see what graphics and processors does. So it's going to be interesting to see this little fight between AMD and Intel.
So one of the things I took the story out originally, I just went ahead and threw it back into the show notes, was basically we posted a story on Medfield, which is Intel's, I think this is what they're really betting a lot on for 2012. Medfield is the first kind of Atom processor that's going to be technically, officially an SoC, a system on a chip, right? So it's not a multi-chip design. It is a single chip that includes everything. And this is really, they're really going to try to make a push into the phone market again. I know they say it every year, but they showed off a kind of prototype phone at the Intel Developer Forum in September. And I imagine we're going to see a couple of announcements from phone manufacturers at CES. This is built on 32 nanometer technology as well. which gives them a nice advantage. Intel has, I think it's fair to say, they have by far the best process technology available in the industry, and it will only take enough time. It'll only take some amount of time for them to figure it all out to get it down to where they need to be. They just need to get the design where it is as well. So we're going to see x86 Android-based phones, x86 Android-based tablets. Medfield is that architecture that I think is really going to kind of turn things around. You know, talking with some people at Intel, it was interesting, kind of sad, but interesting. They've basically decided that AMD is not their enemy anymore. Even really, NVIDIA is not their enemy anymore. Their number one enemy, if you look at this smartphone processor revenues for 2011 graph on this story about Medfield, is the largest portion of this almost $2 billion
industry
bracket is Qualcomm. Qualcomm is making the vast majority of that $2 billion, and Intel says, nah, that's not good. We're going to take that. And this is just over 3 quarters, right? So that's so it would probably be closer to $3.5 billion by the time we get to the end of the year. So Intel really does think that this SoC market, this x86 everywhere type of thing, which kind of takes me back, that x86 everywhere mentality, which I think was something actually AMD started. But I think CES is going to be a lot about this. We'll definitely be paying attention to what Intel has to say, because I think we'll see Medfield-based designs, tablets and phones come out from some pretty major vendors.
Here's the problem with all that. Intel may have the process advantage of everybody else. Everybody, bar none. But the problem is the architecture. They're still pushing x86. And at this level, the ARM, which is more focused on power and performance than what x86 is, it still has an advantage. Even at 28 nanometers with NVIDIA, Qualcomm, whoever, they're still going to have an advantage of performance and power over what Intel has with pure x86 design at 22 nanometers. Now, eventually, that's going to go away. But still, it's going to be very interesting to see what Intel does with their architecture and what ARM does to try to get a little bit more performance out of that process node. So, the next several years are going to be fascinating if you're following the mobile technology area, because it is honestly the most aggressive area that all companies are going for, because everybody wants to have a smartphone that can do all kinds of things, 3D graphics, show them what the weather's like, be able to Facebook everybody in the world. These are things
just what Josh
that
wants to do.
Everybody wants. I don't want to Facebook anybody.
You want
just
to
look
Facebook
at the
all
amount
the
of friends
people.
I have.
No, don't lie. So, but we will be covering that transition here at PC Perspective. You can speak for not just at CES, but there and beyond. So, yeah, let's get into our picks of the week. I didn't really filter through. I knew we had way too much stuff to talk about to get into emails and, of course, the voicemails from that 1-888-38 PC per.
Ooh, voicemails.
So let's get into our picks of the week. We've had 2 weeks to sit and think about what product we really want to recommend to our listeners and viewers, and unfortunately, all I could come up with is Ada64. Ada64 is a program. God, I bet this has been around as long as I have been doing hardware reviews, and yet they're still only on version 2.0. Weird. So Ada64 is basically a tool somewhat similar to Sysoft Sandra. It does some benchmarking, but it's more about kind of process management, like letting you know exactly what all the hardware and software details on all your machines are. If I want to know what stepping of CPU I'm using or what VBIOS I'm using, I'll fire up Ada64 and it gets all that information for you. It's kind of like CPU-Z, but way on crack. It does have CPU memory and disk benchmarks. They're somewhat useful, temperature, voltage, cooling, fan monitoring, hardware diagnostics, software and operating system analysis, which is nice. It's nice because basically if I have a problem with a system and I want to give a report to NVIDIA or to ASUS or to whoever about the problem, I can export this file, send it off to them, and they have every facet of information. They don't have to email and say, what BIOS was your graphics card running? What clock speed was your processor at? Any of those types of things. It just does it and goes. There's a free 30-day version, which is not necessarily free, obviously. But the full version, I think, is $39.95 for Ada 64 Extreme Edition. Because it's extreme. Because it's extreme, that makes it better.
Yeah.
They have a business edition as well that does things like, I don't know, features to compile, manage, and analyze hardware, software inventory of corporate network of computers. Blah, 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 blah. The Extreme Edition, the kind of home personal use, is perfectly fine for what most anybody's going to do. It's just a nice kind of handy piece of software to have around. And again, for $40, it's useful. It's useful. And it's been around forever. So
Ever.
Josh, you got a pick for us? Jeremy picks ice machines or
Ice
something
machine.
like.
Because he's Canadian and he likes ice fishing. So he needs
Weirdo.
an ice machine to fill up that bay of whatever.
So what do you got?
Okay, that was Jeremy's pick. Anyway, you know what? I made the dive this year. I bought an Xbox 360 for my kids.
Oh, no.
I was actually impressed because not only did it have all the stuff and it worked well,
Yeah.
but I was able to connect my HD DVD player that I bought years ago so I can watch all my huge HD
You have
DVD
DVD still?
library on. Finally, Serenity again on HD DVD. I don't have to rebuy it on Blu-ray. I got the damn thing right there. It'll work. So yeah. You know
Good
what?
thing
If
Jeremy's
you
not
haven't
here.
if you haven't made the plunge, you wanted to, it's a good time. Good hardware, good software on it, decent price.
All right.
Yeah.
Alan?
All right, so I don't know if I mentioned this a few podcasts ago. I dug through all the show notes for like the past month and couldn't find it in there. But so there's a thing called the OBI, OBI-HAI. They make this little box. It's a OBI 100 is the model. You won't need the more expensive model, which is the OBI 110. Most likely, you just won't need it. Even on their own website, they're like, you probably won't need this. Anyhow, so here's what it is. It's meant to have some kind of voice over IP service associated with it, and they sell it, I guess tailored to their own little whatever that side service is. The thing is, It has firmware support for Google Voice. And they openly say it does, and you don't have to use it with the other service that, whatever else they have tagged along with it that I would imagine you'd have to pay for, right? So this thing is like $45 on Amazon. And it has a Ethernet jack and a telephone jack. So you basically just bridge your plain old telephone to your Google Voice account for $45. And in theory, that should be the only cost you ever pay. That's pretty darn
That's
good,
actually kind of...
right?
So I have a similar box for my Vonage line, but obviously I pay a monthly service for Vonage line that I don't really want anymore. But
That's what I was looking for. I was looking for the same kind of box.
It's for like 8 years.
Yeah, you get the same kind of box. It should work all the same. I was looking through a bunch of product reviews on it so far. I don't have one yet, but it's like everybody in the product
Positive,
reviews
or mostly
basically
positive?
says that it's like, it's like pegged positive. People just say they get it, they plug it in, they hook it up to their Google Voice, and that's it. It just works. The only weird quirk to it I saw is that you just have to have it like set to use a Google Chat or whatever when you like configure your Google Voice thing, because so that box needs to understand when it has an incoming call, and I guess that's what it uses to figure it out. So
I see.
if you don't get incoming calls for some reason, and if you get one of these and that part's not working, just toggle that setting and it'll just work.
Nifty.
From everything I could find, it looks like every once in a while you find one of those things. It's like, I think they were probably going to be selling a lot of these pretty soon.
I have a really great idea for. I'm not gonna give it away here because everybody will just steal it. It's my $1 million idea. I'm actually gonna quit the website after the new year, after CES, just so you guys know.
Darn.
Yeah.
Sweet. Will we get residuals?
I'm giving it all to willing it all to my dog. Sorry.
Dang it.
What's your dog's name?
Josh Walrath.
Just sweet name.
So let's see. We're going to wrap up the show with 1-888-38-PC-PER, podcast at PCPer.com, PCPer.com/podcast. That is the best place to get all of your hardware technology news in audio form and also video form. Thanks to Ken, who's been keeping up with the video versions of the show. I know he's listening now, so I'm going to reiterate that over there for him. And then, of course, you need to find PCPer on all of your networks and social networks and all that kind of stuff. Facebook.com/PCPer. What else is there? Twitter.com/PCPer, YouTube.com/PCPer, and then the always easy to say G+.2/PCPer. And you can keep up with all of the latest information, news, reviews, and what disease Josh has this week. It's always
disease.
That's going to be in the show. So yes, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thanks for everybody who watched live. If you want to watch us live, we record most every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific at live.twit.tv. So you can join in for the live fun if you're just really hate yourself. You can absolutely do that. So we will sign out. We'll see you next year. I think we will have an episode next week before we head off to CES. So you hear all about our plans for the show and how they will all fail miserably once we get there and things don't work out as we want. So we'll have at least one more episode before that happens. So thank you. Thank you everybody who listens to the podcast. We do this every week. And I think they listen. Do people listen? Yeah, somebody downloads. At least a few people download the episode, which is really nice. And it hopefully everybody in the podcast and Jeremy and people who fill in who aren't here will agree that it's fun to do as opposed to just kind of sitting in a room and looking at a monitor and talking to yourself type of thing. So we really appreciate that you guys let us do this, and we're very grateful for that. So we'll close out the show. We'll close out the year. See you on the other side. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Happy New Year!